Boy, it is an absolutely beautiful summer day out here in the Pacific Northwest. Welcome back out on the mushroom trail. Let's jump into this forest. Let's see what we see. So just moving down this little game trail here, and I was quite shocked to come across this, because here we are in early summer in June, and we've got a Russula. So typically I associate these with kind of the fall fruiting season. So really surprised to see this, and we can see, looks like some of the wildlife perhaps was a little surprised to see this too. It looks like it's taken full advantage of that. It's definitely been eaten on. I can tell too that this hollow stipe is super brittle. These guys collectively are known as the brittle gills. Yeah, this has really been devoured by all kinds of bugs and slugs and wildlife, but boy, super cool to see out here. If this were in a better state, I may consider a nibble and spit test on this Russula to see if I can positively identify it as the shrimp Russula. But in its current state, I'm content to just kind of throw it into the Russula genus and just marvel at the fact that it's even out here. Again, not expecting to see this. I've been seeing quite a few mushrooms that seasonally I think of as being primarily fall mushrooms that are popping out here in June. So seems like those conditions are just right for a lot of stuff to be happening. You know, we've gotten plenty of rain and now we're getting warmer temperatures, but we might have hit a little pocket of weather there that was quite conducive to fruiting of mushrooms that I don't typically see this time of year. So very cool to see. I'll poke around, see if I can find some more of these, but awesome to note. And I'd be curious if you're seeing Russulas out in your neck of the woods. Let me know in the comments. Not something that I really is on my radar in the early summer. So interesting to see. So I'm moving just down this game trail, and something caught my eye down here. So, you know, as we've referenced, this whole past week or so has been especially odd because I've been seeing lots of Russulas. These are the shrimp Russulas up here, the brittle gills, which are a little bit early. And look right down here. So all across this carpeted floor, what I've been stumbling across are small little signs of something that I was not expecting to see here in June. Take a look at this. I'm just gonna give this guy a little bit of a tug. It's my first chanterelle of the season. This is a Pacific Golden Chanterelle. So you can see how it's got those decurrent gills running down the stipe. Nice kind of light yellow cap. This is gonna be delicious eating, and it's certainly gonna cause me to look more closely. In fact, as I'm saying that, take a look up here. A whole little cluster. We've got 3 chanterelles right in here. And again, this is late June. Just crazy to see these starting to pop out already. So I may, you know, what I'm probably gonna do is harvest some of the chanterelles off of this slope, but I'm also gonna leave some because it's so early. I like the idea of them being able to kind of, you know, spore out and do their thing and grow and get bigger in the weeks ahead. So, but boy, if this is any indication of what this mushroom season is gonna be like, I am so thrilled and excited. And just up here, we've got a bunch of shrimp Russulas that have been out for a long time. Again, very early for these as well. So if I take this and we take a look, so these are collectively known as the brittle gills. Let me just put those guys down over there. So take a look at this. So we've got a slug going to town on this. These are going to be super delicate. This has actually been out a while, so it's kind of dried, similar to some of the other ones. But you can see that it's got a super brittle stipe that kind of snaps or breaks like chalk. Hence the name of that Russula group, brittle gills. So cool to see out here, and just amazing to see all these, what I typically consider to be fall mushrooms, or at best late summer, showing up early summer. So boy, I'm gonna be looking so closely. I've got so many spots in mind. I wasn't expecting to see these today. I was more just kind of scouring the surface to see what was going on out here. So absolutely shocked, and I'm not even at one of my prime chanterelle spots, but I know of some that are just down the trail. So kind of excited about what the rest of the day may bring. I don't think I've ever found Pacific Golden Chanterelles in June. So super stoked about that. Let's continue to poke around. We'll leave a lot of these little pins, but we'll forage some for sure. And I can't wait to bring those home to the kitchen. Such a treat this time of year. So I still have yet to get to my Pacific Golden Chanterelle kind of hot spots that I'm interested in scoping out. But I just wanted to point something out and kind of show you one of the things that I'm doing. So along the way, I'm checking spots that I think look pretty decent or reasonable for Pacific Golden Chanterelles. So, and these are going to associate with Douglas firs and western hemlocks, and they tend to like these mossy little slopes. I like the mossy little slopes as well because the visibility is really good. So what I'm doing is, as I kind of check in on these little spots to see if we get any early fruitings, I'm taking, you know, the stubs of some of the earlier chanterelles that I did harvest, and I'm planting them. So like maybe right in this little squirrel digging, right? There's a lot of debate oftentimes around cutting or plucking chanterelles. And so, you know, the research that I've seen, and most mycologists will concur or agree, that it really doesn't hurt the mushroom to pluck it. But what I like to do is to actually pluck the mushroom, oftentimes leaving behind the pins or the small ones, but then take these little stubs or the bases and just plant them different places. There's no guarantee, of course, that they're gonna take, but if you can find really suitable habitat, I see no reason not to do that. And I've heard a lot of folks that I really respect, such as Paul Stamets and others, who have suggested that, hey, this is the way that it works in nature. If you have a deer that comes along and nabs a chanterelle or other mushroom, oftentimes they're gonna take that and perhaps, you know, pull it out of the ground, chew off the cap, and then drop the stub by the wayside. And that could well be just one of the many means by which these mushrooms are able to kind of spread and inhabit new areas. So, but boy, just so excited to know that these are already out here. The Pacific Golden Chanterelle doing its thing. I've got so many places to check, and like I said, I still haven't gotten to my prime spots, but I'm just kind of taking a quick sec to check in on some of these areas that I think could be prime spots. What do we have here? Oh, this is kind of cool. Check this out. So this, I'm gonna peel this back. You can see that this has the hallmarks of an Amanita mushroom. So if I peel this back and we take a close look, you can see this sac-like structure. This is what we typically refer to as the bulb, the vulva, or the egg, or the universal veil. So oftentimes when Amanita mushrooms will bud or fruit out of these eggs or cup-like structures, they'll have remnants of that universal veil on the viscid cap up here. So, but this definitely an Amanita that's popping out. We've had a lot of different Amanitas. Most of the ones that I'm seeing right now are in the Gemata group, which, as I've referenced in previous videos and earlier, it's not really an adequate description. That's from European taxonomy. So Amanita gemata doesn't really show up out here. There's some other names that have been ascribed that also seem to be insufficient at best, but super interesting to see. Love seeing Amanitas of every type out here. Always beautiful. I was kind of hoping that that one was not an amanita and that it was a chanterelle, but it was decidedly not. So we'll move on further down the trail, check our primary patches and see how they're doing. But boy, such a joy being out here today. Let's continue further. Let's see what we see. So as I continue to hike out to my known chanterelle spots, boy, I'm seeing lots of shrimp russulas and amanitas, and I'm also seeing lots of this guy. This is what's commonly referred to as the cat's eye, or the brown funnel polypore. This is one of the few ectomycorrhizal polypores. This is Coltricia perennis. Let's look a little ways up here. Yeah, so here you can see a really good example of that. Let me just zoom in here. Give you a look so you can kind of see why that's oftentimes referred to as the tiger's eye. And boy, you can see that beautiful pored surface. A lot of times these will grow in pairs like this, and then the caps will become fused. That's a feature that I see with this one quite frequently. But again, kind of unusual to have a polypore like this that's actually ectomycorrhizal, so that's working with the trees through connecting with its root system. A lot of times these polypores are saprophytic mushrooms that are working to, work away at decomposing and rotting wood. So kind of a unique polypore to see out here, and boy, they're really out in abundance right now, which is interesting to see. And of course, as we referenced before, so much of what we're seeing out here is not stuff that I typically associate with this time of year. Here's one that's around year-long. Beautiful example of a red-belted conch. You can see just beautiful beads of guttation on there. And as referenced in previous videos, those are the metabolites that likely contain plenty of bioactive compounds that may prove to be interesting in future medical discoveries. So really cool one to see. This is, again, the red-belted conch, Fomitopsis mounceae. But boy, I'm kind of dragging my feet getting out other spots just because there's so much to look at out here. And boy, things have a nice, it seems like the moisture content out here in the forest is just right. And even today, it's like, a little bit humid, and you can just tell that there's enough moisture from rainfall and humidity and all of that to really create some optimal situations here for mushrooms. So if this persists and continues throughout the summer, boy, that would be quite the treat. I never thought that I'd be sniffing at, that wonderful apricot scent that the chanterelles kick off. I don't ever think about that in June. So very interesting to be stumbling across those right now. And well, we can only keep our fingers crossed. But I'll tell you, if you're out here in western Washington and you've got some chanterelle spots or patches, I would strongly encourage you to go out, take a look, poke around. You might be really surprised, even if you've never found them this time of year. This year may well be the exception, because it's not like I'm just finding a single one, but at this point several. Not huge, but big enough to take home and cook up. And I assume if these conditions persist, they're going to probably get quite a bit bigger in the days ahead. So we'll see what the future holds here, but let's keep working our way towards our known spots, which we haven't even gotten a chance to get to yet. So much going on out here. Cool to see. So I'm just in a beautiful little patch of forest, just on a game trail here. We've got a nice kind of mossy open forest floor. And take a look at what I spotted just down here. So catching my eye, just out catching a little bit of sunlight. We've been featuring a lot of these mycoheterotrophic plants in recent videos, and this one is particularly stunning. So check this out, just beautiful plant. This is what's commonly referred to as Pinesap. It's in the Monotropa genus. Let me zoom in here. Let's take a closer look. So again, this is one of those achlorophorous plants that lacks chlorophyll and is paired with fungi. So it's teamed up with the mycelium that's under the ground here, and it's getting all of its nutrients by pairing up with that mycelium and indirectly working with the trees that surround here, all these Doug firs and western hemlocks and the like. So very cool to see, just a real stunner. You can see beautiful flower on that. Again, this is in the Monotropa genus, so this is in the Ericaceae family, the same family as, you know, blueberries and huckleberries and all that stuff. This is the heath or blueberry family. So super fascinating. We've been featuring a ton of these mycoheterotrophic plants recently, from the very closely related ghost pipe to, you know, the spotted and striped coral roots, the Pacific coral root, all those guys. So another one to add to the list out here, just such a beauty. Keep your eyes peeled for these guys, just fascinating plants that again have really developed a unique kind of strategy for life out here in the forest. Super fascinating, widely regarded as being parasitic, so taking and not necessarily giving. Although it's still an interesting one, you know, I'm still curious about the particular kind of aspects or elements of that, you know, just to see if that is in fact an all kind of one-way street, or if there is some kind of symbiosis going on that we're just not realizing. But super fascinating, so interesting to see. Love seeing these mycoheterotrophic plants. This one, Pinesap. And as I look more closely, boy, this Pinesap is simply everywhere down here. And I just wanted to point these out so you'll notice these old stalks. This is last year's flower of that same plant, the Pinesap. So you can see that it's basically, you know, this is that old dried out stalk, and this is what produces those seeds. So you can see the remnant of the flower. So I might actually grab some of those and disperse them in other areas perhaps, because boy, this is just really, I feel like one of the treasures of the forest out here. So super cool to see. And as I look up again, I mean, I'm just seeing all kinds of little heads of this Pinesap. And even, you know, as I scour or look throughout the forest, I'm even seeing other mycoheterotrophic plants, like the Coralroot over there. I'm not sure if that's too far to see or not, but I can see it glistening there in the sun. So super cool. These guys are definitely out right now. I'm gonna poke around, see if I can find some more. And moving just up the trail here, something catching my eye just off to the side of the trail here. Take a look at this. Got a pretty good sized bolete hiding over here underneath this fern. Very interesting. Let's take a look. I'm kind of curious on this one to see what we see underneath here. Boy, that is just beautiful. Almost appears to be the Fiber King. Let me take a look. Let's zoom in here and take a close look at this stipe. Oops, looks like it slipped over there. What I'm looking for on this stipe is I'm kind of curious to see if we can detect a little reticulation. And sure enough, look at that. Wow. So we've got a little bit of reticulation on that stipe. We've got kind of a yellowish sponge underneath. It's looking a little more white, I believe, in the film than it is to my eye visually here in person. So that's kind of interesting. Let me set it down and see if I can get, that's kind of better indication of that true color. So we can see that pored surface. Of course, our boletes will have that characteristic, but boy, seeing this reticulation on the stipe, and then noticing on the top too, how it's kind of this fuzzy, kind of fibrous cap. I believe that what we're looking at is what's known as the Fiber King, which I generally only associate this with the fall time. So again, I'm not 100% sure on that. I'm in a lowland forest, really wasn't expecting to see this. So I'm gonna definitely take this one back and do a little more research and see what we can discover. But awesome to see out here, very cool. Unfortunately, it's probably going to be a little bit buggy in there, but look at that. Beautiful reticulation on the stipe, which is really characteristic of the Boletes genus. So just wild to look at. So I just cut this base off, and as is so typical with these boletes, you can see that the bugs have clearly beat us to it. Let's go ahead though. Let's take a cut through, just see what we're looking at here. I'm really curious to see how this center cut looks. So moving just down the trail, take a look at this little guy that caught my eye. Such a beautiful little mushroom. I always see really interesting mushrooms on this little stretch. Look at these tiny little, I imagine that they're in the Mycena genus. I have no idea which particular species this is. But boy, sure is fun to admire and to look at. I wonder if we zoom in here, let's take a look. I'm kind of curious what the substrate may be that this is growing out of. Let's see if we can dig down and take a little bit of a look. I imagine that it's growing off of some type of woody debris. I'm kind of curious to know exactly what. Oh yeah, so check this out. Wow, so this is actually growing from an old, kind of decomposing Doug fir cone by the looks of it. Here you get a look underneath, just beautiful. And we can see all these little smaller ones here. I'm gonna actually replant this and let it continue to do its thing, but just wanted to kind of investigate. I'm always curious to learn more when I see these ones that I don't see all that often. So, boy, what a beauty, right? Easy to miss. Such a tiny little feature on the forest floor out here. But boy, what a beauty. Boy, and take a look at this guy just up the trail here on this old decaying log. Looks like an old alder log. Check this out. This is just a massive deer mushroom fruiting out of this dead and decaying log. Take a look at this. So here's my hand for scale. So this thing just massive. You can see that slightly furry little cap. And we see, indicative of the spore color here, we see a slight pink color on those gills. We've got a stipe that's got sort of dark fibrils. This could either be Pluteus cervinus or Pluteus exilis. Either way, it's a deer mushroom of sorts. And this, again, as referenced in the past, is an edible mushroom, but not an edible mushroom that's high on many people's lists. So this reportedly tastes a lot like radishes. So this has been consumed during wartime in Europe, you know, at least Pluteus cervinus, the typical deer mushroom. Pluteus exilis is the western deer mushroom. And telling those apart can be a little bit of a challenge, especially in this state. But yeah, I'm told in the comments of previous videos that this was one of the wartime mushrooms that people would consume when food was scarce. So it wasn't by any stretch a choice edible mushroom, but it was one that would oftentimes fruit like this at considerable size and in abundance when food was scarce. So be eaten in times of need, and outside of that, I don't hear of too many people seeking these out, but if you feel differently about that, let me know in the comments. I'd love to meet someone who relishes these mushrooms or just loves the taste of them. I've yet to encounter any folks in that category, but you could be the first one. So if you find these delectable, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear why. And boy, I'm not going to harvest this one, obviously, but certainly fun to admire. Just beautiful. Slight umbo, little furry cap. Pinkish gills, fibrils on the stipe, growing from hardwood. Cool to see. That's the deer mushroom, Pluteus genus. So moving just up the trail here, check this out. So just off to the left here, we've got an old red alder log that's full of old, kind of dried out turkey tail, Trametes versicolor. We can see it's taking on a little bit of a green tinge and far past its prime. So this isn't really what primarily caught my attention. What primarily caught my attention is this really cool slime mold just above it. This is what's commonly referred to as the chocolate tube slime mold, Stemonitis splendens. And look at that, isn't that just beautiful? So this is one of the true slime molds. And this is kind of its fruiting body, the method by which it releases its own spores. So this is obviously not a fungi, but similar in a lot of ways, right? The true slime molds are one of those fascinating little forest beings that those of us scouring the forest in search of mushrooms frequently encounter, these plasmoidal slime molds that are just such interesting little beings, right? So most of these spend the bulk of their life as single-celled organisms, and then they'll oftentimes come together as a single plasmoidal body, so still a single cell with many, many nuclei. And they come in some of the most interesting kind of shapes and textures and just really fascinating little things that play a crucial role out here in the forest ecology. Oftentimes underappreciated, still not especially well understood. So these will scour the forest in search of food in the form of bacteria and fungi and different things. And then when they reach this stage of life, they're kind of entering that new phase where they're going to release spores of their own and kind of start anew. But boy, isn't that beautiful? So keep your eye out for these slime molds. They're just such fascinating little beings with wild little personalities out here in the forest. So very cool to see. So take a look at this. We've got a beautiful mushroom here. I believe that what we're looking at is Pycnoporellus fulgens. And just look at that stunning color. So this is growing on conifer wood. If I get in here and give this a little bit of a tug, we'll just investigate this one since there are several of these caps growing out of this conifer log here. But let's scooch this over here so we can get a close look. So you can see it's got this somewhat soft kind of furry texture, and that applies to both the stipe and the actual cap. If I flip this over, notice we've got a pored surface, and we've got these elongated pores that really have a cool look. So if you get the right angle, you can see down them. In some ways, this reminds me somewhat of Trametes gibosa, the pore structure. We've got these elongated pores that have, you know, from this angle, they're kind of tough to discern, right? Because they are stretched out like that. So very unique pore structure. Boy, just a beauty. Look at that. Quite the work of art here. And I wish you could feel the texture of this, but it's got that nice furry texture and relatively squishy too in by the stipe and along the margin. So it's got a somewhat delicate feel to it. Obviously, you can see somewhat of a banded color surface. Now, this particular mushroom isn't described in great detail in a lot of the field guides, and there's some confusion over it and some speculation that there may be multiple different species that just simply aren't that well described. So super interesting mushroom to see, one that I don't see all the time. You know, I see it from time to time. It can grow on conifer or hardwood from my understanding. And I believe that even though it looks like it would have yellow spores, I believe that it is a white spored mushroom. Maybe I'll have to grab this and put that to the test and kind of confirm one way or the other. But just a beautiful mushroom to look at. So cool to see out here. And again, really catches your eye against this backdrop of greens and browns and all that. So very cool to see. What a beauty. Take a look at this, just coming down the trail here, growing off of a red alder log. We've got one of the true slime molds that I don't see as often as some of the others. This is red raspberry slime mold, Tubiphera ferruginosa. Look at this, just beautiful. Doing its thing here. This clumpy mess, just kind of getting ready to spore out. Just beautiful. You can see a little bit of a bead of sweat there, possibly a little guttation. I'm not sure if these do that or not, but it could just be moisture from rain or from the environment. But boy, just beautiful. Moving just up the trail here, take a look at this. So we've got a really beautiful site here popping out. Take a look at this. Just a beautiful amanita popping out. We see remnants of the universal veil up there on the cap. We've also see those striations out towards the outer edge of the margin. We've got a nice annulus or ring. If we were to take a look underneath, we see white gills. See a bunch more of them back here too, underneath these ferns. Beautiful. And take a look at this. So aside from these ones, this one in particular is very cool because we can see that it's just popped its head out of that vulva or shell. So we see that really kind of distinct, almost looks like it's breaking out of that egg, right? We see that remnants of that universal veil very cleanly on this little button here. So very pretty cool to see. I love seeing amanitas of all types. And just up here, we've got an old friend looking especially stunning here in the sunlight. Take a look at this. Beautiful little knobs of Fomitopsis mounceae, the red-belted conch. And you can see these beads of cetacean just pouring out of this guy. A lot of times I see this when we've got extreme kind of weather changes. Today it's particularly warm out here, so we see these really sweating out. And again, this is kind of like the sweat of that mushroom. Those are the metabolites. So oftentimes it'll kick these out during its growth phases. And this is known to contain a lot of bioactive compounds that are still very much being researched or studied. I've heard Paul Stamets refer to, just these metabolites in general being of particular interest because of how much potential is contained within those. So super cool to see. I always love stopping to pause and to appreciate that. A lot of times I'll quench my thirst by taking a little slurp off of these metabolites, and they quite refreshing. They've got a little bit of a kind of bitter citrus flavor I always enjoy partaking in out here. So very cool to see. That's Fomitopsis mounceae. Doesn't have its characteristic red belt on it right now at this stage. It's a little too young, but beautiful to look at. Very common sight out here in the forests of the Pacific Northwest. Cool to see. So check this out. Just up here, there's a bright flash of white on the ground. And this is an especially common sight right now. And what this is, I'm sure several of you recognize this. This is actually growing on boletes. So specifically, it's growing on the deep purple bolete, Xerocamelus atropurpureus. This is Hypomyces chrysospermus most likely, although the Xerocamelus or suede boletes can host a number of, or I should say more than one, of the Hypomyces species. So this is a parasitic bolete mold, sometimes referred to as the bolete eater. And you can see it just kind of doing its thing here. One of the things that I oftentimes like to do, so obviously I'm not interested in harvesting these boletes at this stage in the game, but what is interesting is that this is much easier to spot than the actual boletes themselves. So sometimes I'll pay attention to where I'm seeing this bolete eater Hypomyces chrysospermus mold, and I'll just simply note that for future reference. So if I see a big patch of white on the ground and I confirm that it's this bolete eater mold, I'll just kind of make note of that. And then the next year, I'll know to look more closely in that particular spot for these deep purple boletes, because sometimes they're really hard or difficult to spot. So they blend in really, really well with the forest floor. So we can use this to our advantage. And so this is where, journaling and kind of keeping track of what you're seeing out there in the forest can really go a long way. So dropping a pin on a map or just kind of noting those spots where you're seeing this, because this is a delicious spring edible mushroom that, a lot of other boletes are not out in the springtime, but this one is out in abundance here west of the Cascades in the Pacific Northwest. So it's one that I love to be able to track down kind of at my leisure, at my will. So that's one way to do it. So make note of where you're seeing this bolete eater mold, because that can be useful information for future foraging trips. Cool to see. And just up here on the side of the trail, we've got a familiar old friend. Here's kind of fruiting out relatively fresh here. We've got some oyster mushrooms in the Pleurotus genus. If we take a quick peek at this, we'll notice that we've got decurrent gills that are running clear down the stipe, growing from hardwood. And if I give this a sniff, it's got a really nice, pleasant fungal anise scent to it. This is, of course, one of our favorite edible mushrooms out here. Fruits fairly prolifically most times of the year. So awesome to see this out here. This is just a small, tiny little fruiting of it. So I may keep my eyes peeled and see if we can find a more substantial fruiting further on down the trail. And if so, I may harvest a bunch of this, but very cool to see. So check this out. I just came up the trail here, and lo and behold, here was this barred owl going about its business, just hunting what I presume are rodents. And very actively, he was making quite the ruckus. Swooping down on the forest floor, he'd pounce around a little bit, and then dive back up out of the brush and onto the branches to take another look at what else he could get. So kind of unusual to see these guys hunting so actively during the daytime, but awesome to see. So I'm just going to take a quick second now while this footage rolls from the barred owl encounter, just to kind of update you on the back half of this video. So towards the end of June, after these previous recordings, I headed out with a buddy out to the Olympic coast. So this is the coastline that spans Olympic National Park. And we parked down at Rialto on the south side and caught a shuttle ride up to Lake Ozette. Originally, we were planning to shuttle all the way up to Shy Shy, but the weather was such that it made more sense to stay dry, get a nice start the following day out at Lake Ozette. So we caught our shuttle, and as fate would have it, our shuttle driver turned out to be a commercial mushroom picker who was driving the shuttle during the off season. Shout out Gene, if you're listening to this by chance. It was such an awesome drive up to Ozette, and what was actually an hour-and-a-half van ride felt a lot more like 5 minutes. It was simply amazing just to hear all of his stories of decades upon decades of commercial picking. From his youngest years when he was taught knee-high to a grasshopper how to identify different mushrooms, to all the kind of exploits and the stories that came with chanterelles and cauliflower mushrooms and all of that. So definitely a wealth of knowledge, and someone that I was super pleased to just chat with. It was such a great start to our venture out backpacking down the coast. One of the things that I found especially interesting, aside from stories of 26 and 34 pound cauliflower mushrooms, which upon me asking him, he noted he's never found in the same spot, oftentimes maybe growing in association with the same tree, but not from the same root base, which has certainly been my experience as well. But also along the way, he happened to reference that this year, that the way the weather's been, he expects to be able to go in and commercially harvest chanterelles this July. So perhaps in a week or two. And he attributed much of that just to the strong humidity and enough precipitation to really get things going, which I found to be quite interesting, especially based on all the kind of typical fall season or late summer at best season mushrooms that I've been seeing in my local lowland forest, west of the Cascades. So super interesting across notes on some of those details, and boy, such a terrific start to our hike. And boy, you can just see how beautiful it is out here on the hike from Lake Ozette out to the coast. Look what we stumbled across here. Just thrilled to encounter yet another mycoheterotrophic plant. This one is commonly referred to as the Gnome Plant. This is a monotypic genus, and this particular mushroom, I've read, is thought to be associated primarily with Heidenellum peckii, which is really something that's fascinating to think about. That's one of those fungi that is just a beauty in and of itself. Not a ton known about this plant, a lot more questions than answers, but again, another partner of mycelium. Awesome to see. And wow, check this out. I believe that what we're looking at here is one of the saffron milkcaps, Lactarius deliciosus group. You can see that green staining along the fringe or along the margin of that cap on the underside. That's real distinctive. This is by no means a fresh mushroom. You can see it's been kind of devoured by insects and is kind of in other bugs, but it's sort of falling apart, so it's not lactating the way that we would expect. But what a beauty. Just look at that. So check this out. I was just moving down the trail here, and a little flash of yellow caught my eye. Let's investigate and take a better look at this just to kind of see what we're getting into. Give it a little tug. Let's take a look underneath. Wow, look at that. So initially, to be honest, I kind of suspected that we were getting into some chanterelles, but decidedly not. Notice this toothed surface underneath in place of kind of gills or a sponge. These are definitely hedgehog mushrooms of some sort. So these are in the Heidenum genus. Oftentimes people's favorites, you know, these are choice edible mushrooms. These will be delicious. Excited to stumble across these. Again, we're in a weird territory where I feel like these are not mushrooms that are really on my radar this time of year, but lo and behold, here they are. A welcome sight. And here we've got more Pinesap, so showing up both inland and on the coast right now. Always great to see. So just getting our first views of the shore from the forest edge as we drop down to Camp Olava. This is the point at which we'll start to head our way south, back down to Rialto over the course of the next few days. Can't wait to see what awaits. Just south of Olava, petroglyphs abound, some tough to discern, but others really clear as day. Take a look at this. So here we can clearly see the sun and the moon. We see a whale. We see an orca up here. These are thought to be 200 to 500 years old, and just so incredible to imagine all the people who've spent time in this very spot. Certainly adds to the magic and the mystique of what's truly a remarkable piece of coastline out here on the Olympic coast. Really something to behold. here we've got what's known as a Mossy Chiton. Boy, look at the colors on this thing. So this is an 8-plated marine mollusk. Just a fascinating little creature. Sometimes you'll see individual little plate sections of shell on the ground. Really something. Well, looks like we should probably be responsible and go protect those backs. Look who's coming.
Hey there. Hey.
So this guy is actually rummaging through this seaweed in an attempt to get these sand fleas. He really isn't too interested in us. It's amazing to think how many of those little sand fleas this guy has to consume to be a notable amount of protein. But boy, even though they're small, there's so many of them. It seems like those bugs are doing the trick for him. So fascinating to watch. So it's just a beautiful evening out here, and I was strolling along, and take a look at this, kind of wild. Not to gross anyone out, but just an incredible bird that's washed up here. Look at that. So this is actually an albatross. Maybe hard to tell just from the footage here, but that's probably about a 7-foot wingspan that this thing has. Just massive, and it was kind of wedged underneath these logs, so probably washed up during a big storm out here. Just incredible to see out here. There's so much going on today. We've been really blessed